Alrighty.
Edit.
You have Restream set up, Mike?
We're live, CJ. CJ, we're live.
Mm-hmm.
Introduce the podcast.
I'm waiting for Twitch to fire up. All right. Hello and welcome back to the Introdrone podcast, the first ever live version. Joined today with Michael Peel, chairman of Introdrone, and our special guest we're excited to have on the line today, Josh Ziering, chief technology officer and founder at Kittyhawk. Josh, thanks so much for being here. How are you doing today, and where are you tuning in from?
Thanks for having me. Is there video happening here? I've never seen this before in this podcast. Is this the first video podcast ever?
This is the first ever, hopefully
stream.
Not the last.
Wow, you guys
live edition.
a much better looking guest than me. But thank you for having me. And, greetings from sunny San Francisco, California this morning.
Fantastic. Mike and I coming from the New York City area. We do this podcast every week and we are thrilled to bring it to you live. There's a number of ways you can get your questions answered. If you're tuning in on Twitch, there's a box down below. You can ask Josh, Mike, and I questions. If you're tuning in on Facebook, drop your question in the comments and that will be routed to us. And if you're tuning in on YouTube, same thing. And we'll try to get those answered. So, every week on the podcast, we talk about a couple articles from the past week. There's a couple of Kittyhawk specific articles we're excited to jump into today. And we also want to talk to Josh about the white paper Kittyhawk put out pretty recently about securing UAS operations. But before we do that, and before we get your questions answered, Josh, talk to us about Kittyhawk's new air control enterprise-driven UTM platform. Super excited to dive into this. You guys announced the latest product, air control and unmanned traffic management platform for enterprise customers and drone operations. The platform allows customers to integrate their own workflows, security, and integrations to make it work for them. So, Josh, talk to us a little bit about this platform. What is it? And talk to us about some of the kind of conversations that were going on behind the scenes and some of the thought processes and problems that you guys are solving with this.
Yeah, no, we're super excited and proud of the work we've done with air control. So, like the name suggests, it really is built specifically for the enterprise. This is a pretty radical departure from what we've done with our consumer product. And while the consumer product will continue to live, our enterprise customers, they wanted more. They wanted more control over how their teams were flying, how their data was moving, and ultimately how they were operating in the national airspace. So, when we say enterprise UTM, this is a pretty new term, at least a little turn of phrase on it. And what we're really trying to say is, Kittyhawk has Before You Fly, right, with almost 100,000 people using that, and we've got Kittyhawk Classic, and then we have air control. And really, it's Kittyhawk is one of the, if not the largest UTM in play today. And so one of the things that we thought was so important is we want to integrate all this information. It only works if a UTM is only valuable if lots of people are using it, if it talks to other stakeholders. So the enterprise UTM side of air control is really about giving people the best operational picture possible and making sure that when their team is doing something, when they go to fly, you have the ability to set the requirements. So there's a concept called no compliance, no takeoff, NCNT. And you're able to say, hey, unless you've completed this checklist and this risk assessment, you've mandated that the airspace is clear, you're not going to fly. And making it easy for pilots to be able to follow that and go through those steps and verify that they've done that, that's really the basis of air control. And as part of that, when it's for the enterprise, security has to be a first-class citizen. It has to be the first feature. We've really been working hard on that, making that the case.
Yeah, and you've been looking into kind of that enterprise security angle long before you kind of put together this white paper and this new enterprise application. Kind of what were the rumblings on the ground that led you in that direction, and what was the kind of core first principles that you worked backwards from when you built it out?
Yeah, well, just a little bit about me is as a young man, I like to take unscheduled tours of other people's computers. Eventually, I figured out that it was more fun to be on the good side of the table, and I discovered my love of model airplanes. Because who knows where I would be right now if I was cracking and breaking into all these things and doing all this nefarious stuff. But I'm glad I found the the way out of the dark side, if you will. But so when we were kind of working with Kittyhawk Classic, we had enterprise customers, and the enterprise is they're risk averse, right? This is what they're trained to do. Big companies move slowly; they don't want to adopt new technologies. And if you really think about what a drone is, it's a flying Linux computer with a camera attached to it. That puts fear; it strikes fear into the hearts of IT managers, rightly so. And one drone in your organization, that's no problem. When you have hundreds of drones in your organization and you just have people willy-nilly operating them in ways that they will find to kind of innovate on how to be insecure, that is a big problem. So understanding those principles and working backwards to say, okay, how can we help our customers lock down this tool so they can get the value and the benefit out of it without the downside risk? That's really where we started with this.
Great. The article mentions that this integrates with DJI, Parrot, Autel, Skydio. What challenges are there creating a system or UTM platform that integrates with all these different types of aircraft?
Well, I actually don't. I don't look at that as a challenge. So, our native integrations are with Parrot and DJI, and that really, when you train somebody on software, that's a great way for you to invest in your team. But if they have to use different software every time, you lose all that benefit. So by having a unified flight interface, we essentially take away a lot of the downside training risk of if the OEM changes the app, all that training you did for your team goes out the window. So having a unified interface like that really adds a lot of value. And then in terms of the other aircraft manufacturers, we're working closely with them. We want to do more, but our live streaming platform is relatively ambiguous as to what it needs for hardware. So you're actually able to stream if you wanted. You could stream from your phone camera. You could stream from another drone. You could stream from anything on your phone. So it's really pretty versatile in terms of what it's able to do. And one of the big improvements that we made with Air Control was our live streaming platform, which kind of has a little bit of that flavor of Twitch, where on the side you can kind of see a map and here's where this is operating. And we're doing, with a good LTE connection, we're doing 30 frames a second at 720p. So this is really full framed, butter smooth, and highly useful for folks in the enterprise and in the field.
Is there any level of user education that's going into this? Because early on in the drone industry, there was a lot of interest just because they didn't know. But as they start to understand what the platforms are, then you run into the, I know this already. I'm not sure that this is where I want to go. So what have you kind of seen in terms of kind of questions that you've had to answer?
Early on, my co-founder, John Hegreness, and I, we kind of realized that we're looking at each other like, all right, we're going to, this is it. We're going to build this company. It's going to be awesome. And shortly after that, we had the second realization that in addition to building the company, we're going to have to build the industry that it's going to exist in as well. As if building a company wasn't hard enough. We were like, yeah, you know what? Let's build an industry too. That's really going to be a lot of fun. But it is a lot of fun and it's a lot of work. And understanding that the drone industry is constantly changing and we're trying to educate users and stakeholders, right? Even if you look at our work with Before You Fly. So Kittyhawk does the FAA's official drone app called Before You Fly. None of those people that are, concerned about airspace as a hobbyist, they're probably not going to be a Kittyhawk customer, but we're educating them to make sure that everybody is operating responsibly, creating a positive impact for the industry as a whole. And it's one of the things that we're most proud of is that we kind of span lots of different stakeholders and educating them, whether it's can you fly here, can you not fly here, or educating them about new features and new capabilities inside of our enterprise product. It's all the same. It's just different participants in the game.
So what's the next news story, CJ? So Josh, we've been the podcast has changed a little bit, so we like to dive into the news at the top.
Don't
So
threaten me with a good time.
I would love to get your commentary on what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, BVLOS waivers. This article specifically is coming out of Canada. So Transport Canada issues new BVLOS drone operations waivers for power line inspections. So MVT Geo Solutions received approval from Transport Canada to fly unmanned aircraft systems beyond visual line of sight in an uncontrolled airspace in Quebec. Josh, what do you make of all the waivers? We're seeing, I think, more and more of them both here in the United States and in Canada. How do you think coronavirus has impacted the kind of how the FAA is doing these waivers, and how much longer do you think we'll have to keep getting waivers until we can actually fly BVLOS without them?
I'm always excited about the waivers, and a lot of people are frustrated right now. They don't feel like the drone industry is moving as quickly as it could. But when I think back 6 years ago to where we started and what Kittyhawk, first set out to do, I remember a world that did not have Part 107, but did not have Lance authorizations. You could not get programmatic authorization to fly in controlled airspace. There was no rule to be a commercial drone operator. So even in this last 6 years, I see tremendous strides being made, and I think that what we're starting to see is this waiver process becoming a little bit more of the muscle memory is there. And so there is an option for folks to be able to say, hey, I want to get this waiver, and people have done it before. Part of the issues that I think were in the past is like, oh, there's not been a precedent for how do we do this. And unenviably, from the regulator side, they have to say, show us how you're going to mitigate all of these safety concerns. How are you going to put controls in place to mitigate all of these safety concerns? And so if you're the first person charged with mitigating, how do you know where the aircraft is when it's not in your sight? How do you know about detect and avoid? How do you understand the larger operating picture when you are not in the aircraft or viewing the aircraft? That's really challenging. I think we're starting to get to a place where we have more examples of this being done. We have better examples. And if you look at like the bridge inspection from North Carolina, BVLOS waiver, I think that's a great use case. And if you really think about it, it's a GPS denied BVLOS. So it's even like extra crazy. You're not getting GPS reception under a bridge. So understanding that there's a lot of different things that are BVLOS. So whether it's a bridge inspection or power line inspection, we're seeing the proliferation of these waivers move into sort of a production format. They're productized. And that's really exciting because then once you have enough of these, there's the data set you need to go make a rule. And I'm particularly excited for that future.
Do you feel too much emphasis has been put on BVLOS as far as actually moving the industry forward? I know our mutual friend Blades has constantly said there's so much you could actually do under Part 107. We had Tom Walker on not too long ago, and he was talking about how you could even run delivery operations under Part 107. You don't have to go the full Part 135 route. Are these really kind of the impasses? I mean, these are the cool things that we want to see, remote ID, BVLOS, but these aren't really the impasses, right?
I don't see them as impasses at all. So on our website, we have a case study with Shell. They're seeing 7 and 8 figure ROI in their drone program, and that's just with Part 107. Travelers, another great example. 7 and 8 figure ROIs with all Part 107. There's not anything special there. So when you talk about, if we only had remote ID or we only had BVLOS, I don't see that as a real hindering factor towards drones being useful in the enterprise.
So on that ROI, because we've been studying this for years and it's always there. It always shows up. Like we put drones in, suddenly ROI is 7-fold. What do you think the impasse is for kind of smaller companies who aren't adopting it? Like, why are they not willing to make the leap if the return on investment is high? Is the return on investment only high at scale? Is that the issue? Or is it just they're not up to the task because they're too scared to get started?
It could be. I think the part of the devil is in the details here in that, okay, if I want to go get a BVLOS waiver, let's just assume it's going to cost me $500,000 between the aircraft, the lawyers, the sensors, all of the things that I'm going to need, or $1 million. Well, that's a pretty high like bar to clear. And there are solutions in the market that, and this is the thing, is like if you want to get it just to get it, just to say we did the BVLOS waiver, awesome, right? If it's part of your R&D budget, that's one thing. But if you're taking money away from something else, for example, if you could just pay a Cessna to go fly this route, and it costs much less to get that data, acquire that data, make decisions from that data, then what is the value of BVLOS? Is it super cool? Yes, but it's still prohibitively expensive from an ROI perspective. And we really just have to consider that the market makes these decisions and businesses are at the whims of this market. So I'm excited that there's more waivers. The price comes down as we have more proliferation and examples of waivers, but certainly not the only way to skin that cat.
When you say the price comes down when we have a proliferation of the waivers, why is that? Is that just because it's been done before and it's a smoother process?
Yeah, I mean, you can look at various other waivers of like how much money does it cost to do the research and to have the data. For example, there's been a number of waivers. Like whenever lawyers get involved, things get really expensive. And look, good if you're a lawyer, bad if you're trying to get a waiver on a budget. So understanding that if the FAA wants data to say that 9 times out of 10, if there's a drone swarm flying around, and this is just an example, this is hypothetical, that you're able to recognize one of the drones as having a problem and they want to see a study of that or they want to see data points for that, it's really expensive. If you look at, for example, some of the parachutes that are now coming into the market for flights over people, the testing that they have to do to get those things ASTM standardized or with enough data to be able to just show the FAA a safety story, it's really expensive. And once that work is done, now the price comes down because you don't have to go do that data on a one-off basis.
Yeah, there's also another factor there, which is even if you're talking about internal legal resources, are they already committed to other tasks? What is their timeline for getting those tasks off their desk, even if you want to do this experiment? And then you're asking them, in many cases, to learn about an entire new field of law sometimes. Or even if they're familiar with it, an entire new aspect of that field because they're used to just filing the paperwork as is prescribed. I think these are a lot of the things that people don't think about when they talk about the drone industry, especially the way that we tend to sell it to ourselves and outsiders. A lot of the work is just regular old enterprise work that has to be done, and that just takes time.
And like Tom Walker said, right, it's like you don't need necessarily BVLOS to go do deliveries. They're delivering those COVID kits from Walmart, right? That's a really novel use case and highly applicable to these strange times that we live in. To be able to do that without the BVLOS stuff is super useful. I don't know about you, but like little social distancing, not a problem for me right now. I can get behind that.
I mean, Tom also made the point on the podcast that even if you can deliver to people within 1 mile of the pharmacy, I can't remember the percentage, but it's an immense number of people, and it's not a drop in the bucket. That is like almost half of those deliveries that you'd be doing anyway. And you don't need to do BVLOS, to your point.
So we got
there's a ton of opportunity. Go ahead, Mike.
So we got a question from the chat. So Scott Hoffman, do you see there being a path forward where the regulatory burden / information gets shared amongst industry players? So essentially, you share your process out with the regular or the rest of the industry, and then they're able to kind of take that open source and apply it to their businesses.
Well, that's a great question. Thank you for that question. We're already starting to do this at Kittyhawk. So we really firmly believe that at the core, information wants to be free. And we also believe that you should never be competing on safety. This is stuff that we've taken from both the open source community and the aviation safety community at large and put into sort of our vision for how Kittyhawk operates in the market. Towards this end, our Director of Legal and Policy, Andrew Elephant, has been, we filed for waivers, even though we don't do drone services. We just wanted to be able to go through this process and understand it. Yeah. And so, for example, we went and got a night waiver, 10739 waiver. I guess technically it's a daytime waiver. But we gave it away for free on our website. So you can go look at what we wrote to the FAA, the procedures we put in place, the processes. We didn't have to do this. It didn't add to our bottom line essentially, but we thought it was a valuable exercise to put this information out into the ecosystem to help the proliferation of drones across the world and in the United States. This was something that we were doing as a show of good faith, right? We want to share that safety story. And I think that's very important. It's also why we, for example, did the security white paper, why we did the remote ID white paper. These are important things that we need to talk about in this industry, and nobody wins when there's no transparency. So transparency is everything in aviation. We don't want to go and hide all of the good details. We want to share them amongst the other industry players.
So, thinking about where we first met, which was, I think, AUVSI 2018, and how much has your business changed since then? Because if I remember correctly, you were a much larger kind of broader focus pilot network, and now I watched the transformation into becoming this really, really enterprise focused company. Can you kind of walk us through that process? What drove those changes, and why you felt that needed to be answered to?
So we've not abandoned the small businesses, right? We still have Kittyhawk Classic. It's it's available. We still have customers that are not in the hundreds of pilots or thousands of pilots by certainly, but the transformation to enterprise was that Kittyhawk is very good at this enterprise software and this enterprise appeal of, like, let's start with security. Let's work backwards into what the drone operations look like. And our customers were headed that direction. We've always wanted to skate where the puck is going rather than try and catch up later. So we looked at our opportunity in the marketplace, and we saw that the enterprise is where we fit in really nicely. Our product lends itself to repeatability and safety. And that's something that the enterprise really, really cares about. Doesn't mean you can't use Kittyhawk as a wedding photographer with a 107, not by any means. We do about 50% of the Lance authorizations in the United States right now. So out of every Lance authorization being done today, half of them will go through Kittyhawk's platform. We don't charge for that. That is available to anybody to use. So we're excited, and we like the little guy. I'm rooting for them to get bigger so they can become enterprises and use our enterprise software. But at the end of the day, we're a business, and we are not an experiment. We are not a proof of concept. Kittyhawk is a business, and we wanted to cater to the needs of other businesses.
How has this year in particular been for you guys in general? Has this been challenging? We were talking a little bit before we started recording, but some people in the drone industry seem to be busier than ever. And there's people that business and work is slow right now. So how has it been for Kittyhawk?
For our customers, work is busier than ever. So, for example, in the utility space, Kittyhawk runs the drone program for power companies that keep the lights on for over 55 million Americans. You have a lot of utility customers. The lights don't stop coming on because there's a pandemic. We work with oil and gas. The refinery is still open even though there's a pandemic. Kittyhawk's customers have been ever more important in the midst of all of this craziness. So we've been trying really hard to be there and support them. It's funny, we have this certification, SOC 2 Type 2 certification, and it's for security and processes. And one of the things that they make you do every year is they say, okay, business recovery and disaster continuity plan. And when you go through it, it's this exercise where you're like, okay, if there was an earthquake and our office fell down, what would we do? And this is this thought exercise you go through. And last year when we were kind of going through it, it's like, you go through some examples and it's like, what if there was, and one of them I want to say, it didn't say pandemic. I think it just said like flu. What if half your company came down with the flu? I remember thinking like, that one doesn't seem as likely as like an earthquake. How wrong I was. So we actually got to dust off the business continuity plan and start implementing some of those playbooks. It's been really interesting to think about it like that.
Yeah, everybody's kind of nemesis in an enterprise is the compliance officer, right? Whoever's in charge of compliance. And I didn't know about SOC 1, SOC 2, SOC 3 until I had to get a new email service platform. and the amount of actual security that goes around that, because we're dealing with people's private information. If people only knew all the boxes that got to get checked just so you can hold their information, um, I imagine that's even harder in the drone industry to kind of to get to that point. Am I right, or am I overthinking it? Is it, you know?
No, you're not. It's actually pretty wild. So I've had to, obviously, like, my background is not in compliance, natural. It's before doing this, I didn't know much about PCI or HIPAA. But for example, we had a customer we were talking to, and they were talking about how, well, we go do, a search and rescue mission. And if that search and rescue mission happens to collect data of a person who's injured or dead, that data could now be considered medical information and would be subject to HIPAA. And I was like, oh, wow, this gets really complicated really quick, even though
Gruesome really quick.
it's really
Yeah.
gruesome, certainly. But really important stuff to think about,
Right.
how far the drone sensor data goes and what it can do for your organization.
Yeah, so walk us through the security white paper a little bit. We got the rotating banner for it so people could go check it out below you on the stream.
Yeah.
But I remember you did your remote ID paper, and it really spoke to the moment. And I think this one kind of spoke to a lot of concerns too. So I think one of the interesting things about it also is that when you put it in plain language, it seems like there's less to be concerned about. So can you walk us through the paper, and what do you think the core kind of philosophy behind it is?
Yeah. So what I saw kind of in the industry as a whole is that people didn't have enough understanding of just basic security culture. And I mean, you guys are in the New York area. That's kind of where I grew up, and we have like four different types of rain. We got like, oh, it's drizzle, it's misting, and we have all these different words for rain. But when you come out in California, I'm just like, oh, it's raining. Okay, well, it's raining. Great. That doesn't really tell me if I need the good umbrella or the boots or what that means. And so it was with the security white paper where I was like, oh, we really need kind of a basic understanding and framework in this industry, especially since a lot of the folks that we deal with, they don't come from a security background. They weren't breaking into computers. They didn't necessarily go to school for security compliance. They may not spend their day reading all of the latest computer security news. So I was like, okay, this is a solvable problem. And the other half of this was people didn't have the basic knowledge and then the understanding, and at the same time, we're being bombarded with lots of security things, right? This is a very timely moment in the drone security world where people are saying, oh, we've undergone an audit, or we've detected this vulnerability, or right, what do these things mean? How does this apply to your organization and your drone program? So the security white paper kind of takes you through an imaginary drone security program of, all right, your enterprise is going to start deploying drones. What does this mean for you? And how do you fit into this larger security framework? And as part of that, we said, okay, let's set up a data classification system. How do you know how much effort to put into protecting something if you don't know how valuable it is? That's a really kind of tricky thing. And it's simple once you understand it, but if you've never thought about, oh, this data is super important, this data is less so important. Those are the kinds of things that really we needed to educate on. And then the other thing is that I felt, and I don't know why, but there was just a big push in the drone industry of it's capital S secure, capital S secure. And there's no such thing as capital S secure. So the paper takes this approach of nothing is capital S secure. Just like there is no plane that is capital S safe. We have the FAA, they've done a great job of creating the gold standard of aviation safety. So to be in a fatal commercial airline accident, you'd have to fly a plane, you'd have to fly a plane for 1 billion hours, right? 10 to the minus 9 is our safety standard. Well, so it is with security, right? We want to make it as hard as possible for people to get this data, and it take as long as possible for them to get that data. But it doesn't mean they're not going to get it. We're reducing the likelihood and increasing the time it takes for folks to infiltrate an organization.
Yeah, one of the things with the security conversation around drones, and a lot of the concern around China, Chinese drones, Chinese manufacturing, not just DJI, just extending all the way into anything that could possibly have a rotor made in China or something to that degree. I think that comes from a more military perspective on what security needs to be, right? You want systems as air gapped as possible. You want them as manufactured in the U.S. as possible. But it seems like on the enterprise, it's just a regular IT problem with a few new variables. I mean, am I overstating the simplicity there?
No, I think the most interesting thing, having gone through all of these enterprise drone deployments, is the people in IT. They can be your biggest advocate, your champion, or they can just shut the whole thing down. And I've seen it go both ways. Where if you do it right, and the security white paper outlines kind of the ways to, before you go and engage with your security team, here's what you want to show up with, hat in hand. Hello, we'd like to do the drone program, and we've thought about you, and we're incorporating all the things you're going to have to deal with. Because without that proper sort of framework, everything stops, because then it's all right. We have to analyze this. We have to go through this whole exercise of what is our risk, what is our exposure, what does this do for us, what is the business case, what is the security case, and just understanding those kinds of frameworks, I think, it's really critical for drones to be able to proliferate the enterprise.
What are some of the common questions or concerns that you got from either current clients or potential customers, and what are the common, and like have those questions changed over time? Are there new concerns now that these questions weren't being asked as much last year?
Oddly, I think it's gotten much better. So we used to get questions like, "Can someone commandeer the drone?" And well, yeah, probably. Like, if we're looking at this, like, the risk of it is.
But that's not really your biggest concern, yeah.
Like, that shouldn't be your biggest concern. In fact, with the amount of training that folks had at that moment, I was like, you should probably be more concerned with the person authorized to fly it, right? Like, hey, this is a brand new thing. We're giving people who have never flown before big drones. Like, let's be thoughtful about where the risk lies. And that's the other thing that we go through, is this idea of risk. How do we quantify risk? And it's really about let's find the biggest pieces of risk and mitigate those, and work down that stack to be able to put controls in place for as much as possible. So the questions have gotten better. No longer is it like, is someone going to hack my drone and fly it away with all the pictures on it. But by and large, I think now we're starting to get to the level of sophistication where folks are, and this is what I also find kind of admirable, is they're saying, hey, can I share my remote ID data before the rule comes out? Kittyhawk has had a remote ID implementation for 2.5 years. We've done work with open source projects like InterUSS. We think that data sharing is going to be absolutely critical for the future of the industry with all the USSs, but it doesn't happen unless there's a base layer of security. And so understanding that opportunity and saying, okay, yeah, if you want to share this information, great. Let's be thoughtful about what we share, when we share, and who we share it with. And getting people to think along those lines has been great. And we're starting to see more and more of those questions about, how do we do this and how does it look?
Can we walk through the particular points of vulnerability along the chain? So, like, we have the drone, it connects to the phone, the data goes back to the data center. Where are the kind of possible points of penetration by an outsider? Sure.
So there's quite a bit. Let's start with, we can go to the drone and we can say, all right, between the drone and the transmitter, there's been some man-in-the-middle attacks. So this is a type of attack where an attacker is able to insert themselves in between a flow of data. Think of it like putting your finger in a fire hose. You can just watch that data come by and eavesdrop on it. So that's an opportunity. But in the last few years, we've seen good encryption become available across the data link. So, somebody nearby can't be snooping on your data. When I used to fly model airplanes, there was no sort of digital encryption between the aircraft and the controller. So if I turn off my controller and my buddy turns on his controller, he can start flying my plane. That does not exist anymore, luckily. So once the data is on the phone, well, we want to talk about what is the security of the operating system of the phone. There's two different schools of thought on the phones and how that works. Android is more open, but they've definitely had their security woes. iOS, certainly more locked down, but not impenetrable by any means. You can look at all the different jailbreaking and folks exploiting that phone. But all right, so we have that now. Let's go one level up to the app. Great. The app's going to talk to something. Hopefully, in Kittyhawk's case, we'll talk to the Kittyhawk cloud. Well, we need to make sure that the connection between the application and the Kittyhawk cloud is secure. We need to make sure the cloud is secure. So we use Amazon Web Services. They have a lot of certifications in addition to our certifications. And then on top of that, the servers that live in that cloud, we want to secure those. And this is really what SOC 2 Type 2 gets at. Are you looking at this whole stack and putting controls in place to mitigate these risks? There's new exploits every single day for almost every part of this stack. So you need to have a process to say, okay, there's a bug that allows somebody to get into the server. Let's patch that. Let's document we patched it. Then let's verify that it's patched. And then from there, once that data moves into your organization, how do we make sure that we're not accidentally leaking something? So, for example, pictures that you take with a drone, they have a GPS tag in them. Just the same way your iPhone is able to show you that map and says, hey, do you want to look at your pictures geographically? Well, that's awesome, especially if you're an attacker who's looking to see.
Mountains of metadata. The metadata is almost better than the image data, right?
Yeah, metadata is just as delicious in many cases. So looking at that and saying, all right, if we're going to move this data in our organization, let's classify it properly so people aren't just forwarding drone pictures around saying, what do you think of this, Mike? What do you think of this, CJ? There's a lot of different thoughts about how do you control and prevent data leakage and exfiltration. So it's a full stack kind of thing, and it is a lot of work and a lot of oversight, but there's a lot of opportunities to get in and do nefarious things. That's just the nature of networks computing. Nothing's capital S secure.
On the AWS side, do you have to customize per client requests? Is that something that comes up, or is Kittyhawk kind of just an endpoint to their regular enterprise data?
So some of our enterprises that we work with have oversights, like the MTSA, Maritime Security and Safety Act of 2001. After 9/11, there was a big thought that the ports are going to be the next target. So there's special oversight that has to happen for various entities like that. Some of our folks have DHS or DOJ oversight that subjects them to different security standards. We've had to do, a few bespoke things for different customers depending on their needs, but that's what the enterprise needs. They need the ability to say, this is our framework. It has to fit inside this. And that's something we've been lucky to be able to hear first and hear those requirements and understand that product need and respond to it appropriately.
All right, I want to take a short break so we can show off, Josh, today we are launching LaunchPad.aero. So a couple months ago, you challenged me to create the Netflix of drones. So that's what CJ and I went ahead and did. So we have all of the previous session content for Interdrone, all our webinars from here to 4. All of our podcasts will be there and accessible. And it also connects you to your individual UAS professional profile and to your company. So we built a full stack thing here to create a resource for the drone industry to use, and I'm just going to show it off. So 1 second. So this is LaunchPad. So we have the Video Cloud Index, which has all the past videos, like I just said. The one rolling at the top right here is Dan Elwell's keynote from 2019. Let's go down to a category, construction. See what we have available here. This is one of our favorite speakers. He's on our board, Richard Lopez. So we got full 1080p high quality video. You can educate yourself about the drone industry right here. And then you could also connect with people and find out more about them through their profiles. I'm going to show off Kittyhawk's page while we have Josh on the line. So Kittyhawk is featured in the energy sector for their great work there. So we've put their profile in association with the energy sector. And if you look at their individual page, we also have video there for their drone ops solutions for enterprises. All of this is tied to individual profiles on the UAS Professional Index. Let's take a look at Jennifer Andrews here. Yep, so everything interconnects with each other. So you could go to Bell Technology where she works. So LaunchPad is starting today. Most of the content is free, but we do have some premium content behind the paywall for $7.99 a month. You also get access to our exclusive Interdrone LaunchPad Discord channel with that. And actually, you get access to that for free today. If you check at the bottom of Josh's face in the rotating banner there, you should see a link to our Discord. So I'm going to come back and we're going to ask Josh about what he thinks about the future of the industry and where we are now. So Josh, let's go with that question. Where do you think we are now compared to where we want to be?
Well, I think there's two competing things that are going to put pressure on innovation that are going to be very good. The first is this idea that UAM does not exist separately from drones. That is not a separate entity. It's not like there's separate airspace. We're all occupying the sky. So as those two sort of parallel tracks start to converge, I think that's going to add a lot of innovation in the next 5 years. I think that's pretty exciting. I don't think it would be unreasonable to think that technology that we're seeing today in the drone world moves into the UAM space. Think about active detect and avoid, right? What a great use case on the drones, but certainly a lot more important once there's an autonomous aircraft carrying people or cargo. So the sort of the confluence of those two things are going to be creating innovation. And then everyone likes to say that the regulations are holding us back. I'm not quite that bearish. I think that the regulations are going to certainly help, and we're excited about the remote ID rule coming out. But there's certainly no reason to think that the party can't start until the regulations are done. I think the party's happening. So understanding, and I think the industry really needs to take this to heart. We don't have to wait for regulations. The technology is here today. And there are ways for us to implement solutions within the existing regulations. I'm not saying break the rules. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying we don't have to wait to innovate. We can do it today. The regulations shouldn't be hindering us. They should only be helping us do more standard implementations of different technologies. So those are my two that I think we're going to see in the next year. I think, when COVID is over and we're ready to go back to some degree of normalcy, the drone industry is well suited to really keep moving forward. And this has been an interesting time, but drones have certainly seen a good use, right? It's not like out of all the industries, like we're not in the office catering industry, for example. Probably not a fantastic
office real estate, period.
Office real estate, right? The drone industry is continuing to innovate, continuing to move forward and grow, and even seeing some interesting new use cases that are really helping people amidst all this turmoil.
Right.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot. Just where we kind of shoot ourselves in the foot with doubt, and I'm not even sure it's that real, because the companies that are successful aren't thinking about it, right? They're just figuring out what the regulatory path is, creating that kind of liaison service between their client and their product that fills that gap. And ultimately, that's what any good product does. So is there kind of a first mover's advantage here? Like, if you're an enterprise and you're not on it, do you think that, you're going to be left behind once regulation does open up because all that groundwork is done? Or do you think that all of the ground you make up now actually will be insignificant because the regulation will be so open?
That's a great question. I look at kind of the hardware industry. So, right, for $1,000 today, you can get an aircraft that will do a ton of stuff to give you high ROI. That was not the case, 4 or 5 years ago. We've really seen this like commoditization essentially of the hardware platforms. And because of that, what did we see? Well, we saw the proliferation of good drone software that said, all right, let's take advantage of this. The enterprise, as they're seeing the software start to mature, I think they're saying, okay, great, this is a lot less of a burden to jump in today. I think it reduces the barrier to entry. lower than it was before.
So back to kind of future casting. On the last podcast we did, you were talking about kind of being in an air taxi yourself and waving to the person in the next air taxi next to you.
Yes.
Has that scope changed at all? Have you reduced kind of the vision, or are you kind of still excited for that future and you just have a different timeline?
So let's see, what was that, 54 episodes ago? So congratulations on 54 episodes since your last annoying guest. But
I
no,
think you're our first big one though. So.
thank you, thank you. But no, I'm still bullish on this future. I think the things that excite me now are a little different than what used to excite me then. So I'm particularly interested in this idea of UAV and UAM coming together. I want to see the technologies cross-pollinating each other. I think that will help move us towards that future where I'm, waving to the person in the autonomous vehicle next to me. The other thing I'm pretty excited about is energy density and the changing technologies for propulsion. I think that there's a lot of opportunity in sort of, look, lithium ion's great, lithium technologies are great, batteries are only getting better. We have a far larger electric car market with a lot more investment than we did even 5 years ago. Those technologies will cross-pollinate and help battery technology improve. But as we're like looking about what does the future offer, it could be something that's a hybrid. It could be hydrogen. It could be any number of different battery technologies. And you can see there's some cool startups working in this space. Qberg, which is a Boeing portfolio company, along with Kittyhawk, they're working on some great battery technology. And seeing the technology inside of the aircraft get better is just going to allow the software that powers it to do even more awesome things. And that's why I'm so bullish on this, is I love to see constantly improving platforms so that the ecosystem can innovate on the opportunity provided by them.
So those familiar with the podcast will know I'm not as bullish on UAM as far as timelines that are being projected. I am bullish on the fact that I think it brings much needed money into the conversation to develop the systems for all unmanned aircraft to actually fly safely within the NAS. I mean, is there anything to be apprehensive about with UAM as far as, what's your timeline where you think you'll see even a middle mile? Because I'm more of that mindset that middle mile delivery will be first rather than inner city transportation. When do you think we can hope to see something at least better than a demo that goes up and then back down?
Yeah, and I think the drone industry struggles with this too, where a lot of the headlines you see, if you're in a parking lot, you're putting up easy ups and there's like tables and we're doing a demo today, that is not production technology. And that's something Kittyhawk works very hard to make sure that we're doing things in production. There's a lot of demonstration. There's a lot of let's go out and show off this technology. We're of the mindset, let's go out and put it into production. And we're going to learn far more doing that than being in a parking lot somewhere. So as part of that, your point of when will we see it? What will it look like? I really think that it's probably going to be more middle mile, like you said, but also the Jetsons is not going to come pick you up in your front yard yet. We're not there. I don't think that's even remotely close. But I see a lot of opportunity for low-cost, heavy cargo delivery, but otherwise would not be viable. One of my favorite examples is when you look at a lot of like rural indigenous communities, they have this problem where it's like, all right, a gallon of milk is like $9. Well, why is that? It takes like 4 hours to get out there on these crummy roads. And so it's like, wait, impoverished communities that need, could benefit the most from inexpensive food have really expensive food. How does that make any sense? And I think like a lovely heavy cargo air transport solution is able to solve this problem really readily and offer opportunity and kind of, enrich everybody's lives. I think that's an amazing use case. And for every use case like that, there's 10 other use cases that are just really, really exciting. I think about, even blood delivery, as we see the collapse of trauma centers, like regional trauma centers. So hospitals are collapsing all over the United States because there's just differing population density and there's a confluence of factors. But what you're left with is that if you're in a car accident somewhere in the middle of nowhere, they can't get you to a place to get you stabilized, and this is a big deal. And then having a network of blood in the United States, such that if you are in a very traumatic accident, you need this type of blood. Having that logistical chain is very critical. I think that there's a lot of opportunity. Anti-venom is another one. Blood and anti-venom are great logistical concerns that I think high-speed cargo drones could solve. And whether that helps the crumbling hospitals or not, I'm unsure, but I think it will help this network as a whole be able to better accommodate folks who are in trouble and need assistance. What a great use case.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've often thought that if we actually get to this drone future we're all kind of pushing for, that West Virginia will suddenly become the New York City. Because all of the things that stop West Virginia from just being the biggest place on the planet with its beautiful mountains is related to those roads and not being able to get transportation through for certain resources. Secondly, though, I kind of want to bring up something that, because you've been talking blood and just medical transport, and I wasn't sure that you were that supportive of those use cases, because I think I saw you call out what probably was a bad one or one that didn't scale. What are the bad examples then of just drone programs or drone operations to nowhere, especially in the medical field, if you have an example?
Well, the one that you're talking about that I was a little bearish on was they were delivering a kidney. And I think that that's putting the cart way before the horse. Part of my trepidation with that particular use case was, one, if you've been on the waiting list for a kidney, and this is a long waiting list, why would you entrust it to something that is less than going to get there? That makes me very nervous just from a logistical perspective. We don't have kidneys floating around left and right, like, oh, we'll just get another one.
Well, soon we will.
So, soon we will.
Pull a kidney from the sky.
Quite literally.
But not yet. And I just thought it was a gratuitous display of unnecessary solutionism. And I wanted to say, like, wow, of all the things that we could be doing to demonstrate the value of this technology and put it into production, this is the one we picked. And not to say that it's not an accomplishment. I'm not talking badly about this. Is awesome that they did it. I think it's very cool that they were able to achieve that, make that accomplishment. But is it going to be, are you going to have a business delivering organs with drones? I don't know if that's the case. I don't know if that's the business use case. So I like the market. I want the market to make the decisions about what's important. I know that demonstrations like this prove the value and the worth of drones, but I would much rather show me something that's easily put in production, readily scalable, rather than something that's like big and headline grabbing, but doesn't ultimately provide a lot of value to the end user. Do you think the person receiving that kidney was like, oh man, I am really glad this was delivered by drone? Man, thank you.
Yeah, function first, right, over form. With the headline thing, though, I do miss having more headlines. I felt like there was more excitement, more attention, more eyeballs, and therefore things seemed to move a little bit faster when there were more headlines. I think we ultimately can't go back to that spot because so much was BS that it ended up actually inflating kind of concerns for regulatory bodies and inflating just expectations, which also hurt enterprise adoption. Like if you try that drone thing, didn't have the right plan for it, then you drop it, then it's twice as hard for a Kittyhawk to get in there with the right solution. Do you miss the days of the headlines, or do you feel like we made the progress we needed to make?
Well, one of the things that I always say is it's my job to go to work every morning and help make drones boring, to help make them so that when you hear one, you don't even look up. It doesn't matter. It's just another damn drone. Getting this technology to the point of a level of reliability and safety where they're blasé, that is my job. And understanding that, I didn't love the headlines because there was a lot of noise amongst very little signal. And you look at this, you're like, how can this be good for anything? How can this be good for anyone? So one of the things that we were just, thinking about in general, and I had dinner the other night outside. It was a rare, nice San Francisco day. And here's this Mavic flying around the Embarcadero. And I was just like, doesn't even faze me. This is great. Like, there was a time when I would have been like harassing the owner. Like, hey, what's that? Where's it going? What's going on? How high does it go? How fast does it go? but yeah, making this technology such that the headlines from it are much more impactful and I would say far higher signal than noise.
So outside of UAM, what impactful headline would you like to see in 2021? Not COVID related.
Well, I mean, so this is not COVID related, but I like the idea of, and this is probably not a Times headline. This is not a Washington Post headline. This is maybe more of an industry rag headline. It's an OSHA magazine headline that says something like drones help eliminate falls and injuries from working at height by 38% in said organization. That would make me really happy. Workers' comp claims are down 26% after implementing enterprise drone program. You know, tooling accidents have been reduced. Safety has been increased. Like, it's going to be a big deal for that industry, and you're going to read it. It'll be like, oh, hey, here's energy monthly or whatever it happens to be, and it's like drones contribute to this many people not having to be out of work. I think that's the headlines we want to see. Those are the real use cases, and helping people and helping organizations be more efficient and safer. Those are the real value benefits, I think. I don't know if I see another drone delivery headline, because what it does is then the general public thinks, I'm like, oh, they're like, what do you do for a living? I'm like, I work in drone software. And they're like, oh, what do you deliver? I'm like, I only deliver value to our customers. I don't deliver burritos. You're not getting ice cream. Slurpees headed your direction.
Right.
CJ, you want to take us out?
Yeah. Yeah, we're coming up in an hour. So, Josh, any final thoughts? I mean, you've been pretty candid and we've kind of gotten a little introspective here at the end, but did you have any kind of final thoughts and maybe some words of encouragement for our listeners and for the industry as a whole as we close up this year?
Yeah, no, I think we're in a strange time, but the drone industry is a strange place. We've all kind of decided that flying robots are really important to us. You got to ask yourself what kind of people think that sort of thing. So we're a different breed here in the drone industry. I want to thank you guys for having me. The security white paper is free. It's available to download on our website, kittyhawk.io/security. And really excited to be here. Congratulations on the new format. This is an exciting, I think, different look at how the industry is doing podcasts, videos, and looking forward to checking out the Netflix of drones, Mike. So yeah, that's exciting. And I appreciate you guys having me on the show.
Great. Yeah, we appreciate you kind of taking your chances, being our first live guest, and everybody tuning in. We appreciate you.
Camera this whole time.
Yeah, appreciate everyone tuning in and the questions. We'll put the security white paper in the description of this podcast. This podcast will be on Twitch. It'll be on YouTube, Facebook. We'll get this on Spotify, wherever pods are casted. If you are watching this on YouTube, make sure to ring the bell, hit subscribe, sign up for alerts, and we'll put some contact information as well for Josh and the Kittyhawk team down below for anyone that has questions and wants to learn more. And we appreciate everybody for tuning in. We'll see you guys next week.
Yeah, and join our Discord. All right.
Join the Introdome Discord.
See y'all later.
Nice. I think